For me, there were just so many intense listening experiences. You know, I could go back individually to so many artists and the discovery of them, and the intensity I was involved within that. I mean, if I go right back to when I was really young and I started to properly discover music, it was very much black music that was my first love, in terms of my brother, who was 10 years older, and my sister, who was 6 years older, were buying. My brother was buying like Stax Atlantic, all the kind of stuff the mods were listening to. My sister was buying all the Tamla Motown and Trojan tracks, you know, the reggae tracks as well. And so these were the records that were coming into the house, and I was listening to, you know, eventually I kind of took them myself as they went off to college and stuff, and you know, they became the basis of what my collection was. But just listening to that music, I mean, I blogged recently about, well, I did an interview a few years ago about, I was asked, you know, like, can you name a track that has made a particularly strong impression on you? And the track that I chose was The Temptations' Ball of Confusion, which was a track from 1970. Talked about the times in which people lived, the actual musicianship and everything, the producer, Norman Whitfield, one of my favourite all-time producers, the Temptations themselves, as you know, the vocals, the vocal harmonies of them. The subject matter, as I say, was talking about the times in which people were living, the history of the times, about stuff like the racial situation that was ongoing, political situation, and as a young kid hearing this, you know, I learnt a lot from this type of record about why this music was special, because it went to a deeper level, because it was involved with a struggle. There was it was coming out of the civil rights struggle, and it was coming out of the period where black people had taken a stand and were looking to change, you know, the political landscape and what they'd had to put up with for years and years, and nowhere more than the music was that apparent, and sometimes it wasn't even in the tracks that had what you might call like deeper lyrics. It was sometimes you know, the lyrical throwaway tracks. There was still that depth in the performance. There was still something there that's connected, and so that was always there for me. You know, like from the off, in terms of like an intensity of listening to music, listening over headphones. You know, because obviously back then we didn't have great sound systems. But though that sound system I listened to the music on first, that was probably the best sound system in the world, because it was like my machine of discovery, really, you know. Then, you know, like, of course, Bowie, you know, he came along, and I became you know, absolutely obsessed with you know, his music. So this is the period, the Ziggy Stardust period, 72, 73, where I really clicked in, like a lot of other people in my generation, and then started to listen to everything he'd previously done, and obviously the subsequent albums. And I'd say that Ziggy Stardust was probably, by the time I was like 20, the album I'd most heard of all that. I'd heard it hundreds, maybe thousands of times in that period. But I remember being in Germany in 1980, and shall we say, it was a bit airy at the time, and I was at somebody's house, and they put on Ziggy Stardust on a really nice system, and it was a revelation, because I heard it in a completely different way, as though, even though I'd heard it so much, I could separate. Now I could hear where Mick Ronson was doing backing vocals, and you know, the instrumental aspects of it, who was playing what, where, when. It's like the whole kind of sound, the sound image, like separated into all its various compartments. It was almost, that was the moment for me that the production mind came into play, because previously to that, I think I'd always listened to music as a whole. It was the whole sound thing. The deconstruction came really maybe just by looking at the lyrics later on, but the first hearing, it was about, you know, the whole thing. And then, you know, as I say, I looked a little bit more closely into it. But what this did to me was, it literally opened it all up. It unlocked the fact that, you know, I was listening to something that had probably been recorded on 16 tracks, and on each track there was something different, like, you know, as we now know, you know, or as, you know, I later, you know, got involved in production and everything, and multi-track recording and everything. That's what I know what goes on now, but at the time I didn't. But I was starting to hear it. I was beginning to understand it from a different level. So that surprised me, that something that I could hear, I'd heard so many times, could offer something so new to me, even all those years on. And that's the great thing I think about music, is it has that power to continually surprise you if you allow it to do that. But you have to put yourself in that headspace. You can't expect to, you know, sit back tweeting and let it go and then for it to blow you away. It's not going to happen. You're going to say, yeah, very pleasant, I like that, that's nice. But you're not going to get any kind of oral revelation off the back of that. It's like, say, watching a film. I remember, like, when I was 18, I saw Apocalypse Now, and I'd seen The Deer Hunter before that, and the whole kind of thing with The Deer Hunter with the Russian roulette made it more exciting. Apocalypse Now was a little bit deeper, and I couldn't quite, you know, and I would have said at that moment in time that you know, The Deer Hunter was the superior film. But 3 years down the line, I went back to Apocalypse Now, and I got it. It just blew me away, you know. And it's one of my favourite all-time movies. It's a film. It's not even a Vietnam film. It's like a film based on a book, you know, Hearts of Darkness, about Africa. So you know, from the 1800s. So it's got a wider range than being simply a Vietnam film, as I'd originally viewed it as. And I was looking for the action, and the action was a little bit of a different kind of action, you know, than you used to in your war films, you know, when you were a kid, you know. But with that little bit of more experience in my life and a new way of looking at things, it opened up completely. And it's the same with music. It's the same thing, that you can hear things. That's why, you know, like artists that didn't mean that much to us at one point, that we could take or leave, that all of a sudden later in life you discover them or rediscover them, and and the penny drops, and you realise why there was this great fuss about them in the first place, you know. Well, I mean, I was reading something from an old 60s underground magazine from Seattle called Helix, and in it the reporter, he was at that particular point in time talking about this phenomena of what was happening with young people who were buying albums. I mean, albums at that point for the first time were being seen as an artistic statement rather than just a quick collection of tracks, which was what they were previously regarded as. And these people were sitting down in their room, really quietly, kind of putting the music on and absorbing it and listening to it. And it was a whole experience. And it just got me thinking of how much we've lost that in the modern age, that people just don't listen to music anymore in that respect, i.e. giving it the full attention that they might think they are, but you'll see that they're texting away, or they're on the computer, or, you know, or they're popping up and going out, you know, and that, you know, that you wouldn't do that in a cinema if you were watching a film. But because music's so much around people all the time, they hear it everywhere they go, it's just there now, that I think they've basically lost the ability in lots of respects to understand, you know, the process of what should be happening is that somebody's been in the studio and put down this music and hoping that somebody will sit away and listen to it. I mean, obviously people do that on headphones and stuff like that, but they generally do it to pass the time. So maybe they've got a journey to make. Yeah. Let's put some headphones on, you know. So people aren't just like kind of saying, right, I'm just going to sit down and listen to this album tonight and take it in and absorb it and enjoy it. And that's what we, you know, decided to do with Living to Music, is select an album a month and say to people, you know, at 9 o'clock on the first Sunday of the month, you know, we're just going to sit and listen to it, and if you want to join in, do so, and if you want to comment on the blog and give your impressions of it. And it all came out of that, and the title Living to Music was in that piece, that Helix piece. He said that, you know, people, he described it as, you know, people are living to music, that they're putting more in store in that than they would in, you know, almost like kind of spiritual matters and stuff, you know. And it's also kind of spun off with Colleen Murphy, who does something called Classic Album Sundays. And Colleen, I mean, she was doing something similar, but just inviting a few people to her house and having like dinner and listening to stuff, because she's got like an amazing kind of audiophile sound system. Um, and it was a friend of mine who commented that, you know, what to her what I was doing, and I think that spurred her on to the idea of hiring a venue. She did it in a London pub, and initially she tied in with what I was doing, you know, with Living to Music, selected the same albums and everything, and did that whole process, you know, in an outside environment where people could come down, put a beautiful sound system in there and everything. But that's spun off now, that she's taken that to New York. She goes into festivals and she does it. She's been in art spaces, and so that's great, you know, because the whole point of what I was trying to do is promote the idea of listening. Yeah, I mean the pace of life and it's only getting faster, and how fast it will go. I mean, I'm kind of very interested in the author Alan Moore, comic writer. He talks about the culture of steam, and I very much agree with that. You know, that information is, you know, he talks about a theory of information doubling, that over say 50,000 years there's X amount of information. They can measure it by the amount of inventions and things that happened during that period of time, but for that to double it took another say 5,000 years, and then it goes onwards like that. So you get to the 60s and information doubles by the 70s, and now we're at a period of time where literally it's getting to a crazy extent where, you know, within a matter of years it's going to be doubling, you know, every thousandth of a second, you know, and this is what it is. It's the internet, it's the age, it's all there. It's everyone's got a Facebook, everyone's got all the things on there. There's so much, there's too much, we can't take it all in. And you know, I talk to friends a lot about, you know, the idea you go on the internet and it's so easy to pull you some, because it's such an interesting thing. There's so many things of interest on there that you can start, you know, on task looking for something, and before you know it, you're in a completely different realm. You're learning stuff, but so you know, I tend to think it is the trick. You know, is going to be about bringing things back in and keeping focus on what you're doing, being able to find a way to do that. And that's a little bit like, you know, the idea of sitting down, listening to music, focusing it. You can't just like let it just take, it'll just take you like the wind and throw you all over the place otherwise. So it's finding out what information you want, what's necessary to you, and then having the self-discipline to be able to keep on track, to go for that, rather than just be pulled off down the side road and into something else. Not just music, but in general, the idea of, in this kind of busy world where everything is moving so quickly and the flow of information is you know, is basically at boiling point, that to find whatever we can to slow that down.
Yeah.
You know, whether it being getting back into nature or whatever, or you know, something like watching a film, or listening to music, or yeah, and I say watching and listening, and I mean it in a sense that, you know, I mean there's plenty of times, and this is going back, this isn't just the digital age. I was saying this to people years ago. I'd say, you know, have you heard such and such a track? And maybe I'd be talking about a classic track, and they'd say, well, yeah, of course it is. Like, yeah, but have you really heard it? Have you actually given yourself to this track, sat down and they've gone, and you played it, and they've just come away and gone, oh, I didn't realise. You know, I've heard that many a time on the radio in the background when I was at someone's house. It was just there when I was having a conversation. But I've never actually stopped and listened to that. And you know, I was forever, you know, doing that with people, just saying, just listen. And it'd drive me mad sometimes if you sat in a room and, you know, like people, what they consider to be listening, and you know that, you know, like 30 seconds into the track, they're talking and commenting on it, and it's like, no, just listen, let the track finish, and then talk about it, and do that. I mean, it sounds, on one level, it sounds a bit draconian, but really, it's just showing the respect to the people who made that track in the first place.
Yeah.
That's what they would have hoped for, that somebody would have give it that time and taken it in. It's a double-edged sword, really, because on one level I think the internet's an incredible thing. I think it's amazing that somebody can hear piece of music that they like and find out that it's by, for example, let's say Roxy Music, and then they can go onto the internet and they can find more about them. They can go to Wikipedia, they can read about it, they can go and see some YouTube clips. That's great, you know, I love that, I love that. I'm not, you know, but in a previous time.
I'm a ref being chased out of town after the worst game of my career. You forget one down and the whole stadium turns on you. And if you have cut rate insurance, it may not pay for all this. So get Allstate. You can save money and be better protected from mayhem, like me.
Shop less, get more. Make one call to an Allstate agent.
Maybe 30, 40 years ago, they'd find something they liked. It was a whole different process. They'd really have to work hard. And a lot of people kind of think that people should still have to work hard. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's more about that focus that we're talking about, is why are you interested in this? There's obviously, you know, a kind of almost like a musical tourism, tick it off the list. Yeah, I've heard the Rolling Stones now, I've heard the Doors, but you might have only heard one or two tracks. You don't understand anything about the times in which they lived and why it was relevant and why this music was so, you know, on the cusp at that moment. Because it's like, even, you know, like you talk about, sometimes I might talk about, say, a dance track. For example, you know, I might mention a track like You're the One for Me by D-Train, which was a track from 1982, big club track. And nowadays people look back, I think it was a disco track, but I know that it was the start of bringing in like more electronic instrumentation into dance music. It was a different sounding track the moment that came out. And the reason it doesn't sound so kind of unique and different is because so many other people copied that formula and followed that. And it's the same with films. It's like somebody might go back to Citizen Kane and go, yeah, it's all right, but I don't get it. But they don't realise that it's because it has such a vast influence on every other film that came, that these ideas that are in there, you know, they don't see them as like unique and original, and because they're not to their eyes because of what they've seen since. But when that dropped, so you've got to get yourself again into the mindset of the moment and where it's coming from, and then, you know, that you get your nourishment off that, the realization, you know, wow, you know, they were doing that. Somebody explained to me, a friend who's an artist, he explained to me, he talked about there being 4 stages. He called them the primitive, the classical, the baroque and the mannerist. And he said, for example, in a musical sense, the primitive would be, you could say, I mean, it always goes round in cycles. These cycles are always continuing. We're probably at the moment, we're in a mannerist stage. But if we go back, we could say the primitive stage was like something like rock and roll, raw edge, from the heart, straight on, you know. And then the classical stage being the people that took this rock and roll and then started to craft it in a new way, like the Beatles did. And a baroque album might be a Sgt. Pepper's or a What's Going On. It absolutely captures its moment in time. And then you get to the mannerist stage, which is where basically it's people who are taking these ideas from the past and rehashing them in a sense, which is you know, it's not just about copying, it's a necessary part of getting to the next primitive almost, to take that round. And where that really works, and the way he explained it to me was that, you know, I'm not somebody who's really up on kind of art and stuff, you know, like, you know, gallery art and stuff. So he was explaining that you might be in a gallery and you might be looking at 2 paintings, and your qualitative judgment tells you that they're pretty much as good as each other. Somebody would say to you, what do you think, which is the best? You say, yeah, they're both good. You know, I can't really choose between one of the 2. But then they say, yeah, but that one there, that was painted 50 years before that one. That couldn't have been painted without that. Then it goes like that. Then you realise, wow, that's the creativity. That's very good. But all it is it's a copy, really. It's you know, the real, you know, the real kind of spark is in that one. That's where that's where it comes from, and it's the same with music. It's understanding. It's maybe a lot of people don't want to get into music to that level. They just want to hear it and enjoy it, and most people are like that. And most people wouldn't be interested in maybe in this modern age in sitting down and listening to stuff. But there's always, you know, a significant minority of people that would benefit very greatly, you know, if they invested a little bit of time within doing that. Well, I think that's always been the case. You know, obviously that's why the pop single was generally around 3 minutes in length. There was a reason for that, is because of people's attention span. What happened during that kind of 60s era, though, is that enough of the people that were more thoughtful about it managed to bring this music into a kind of more mainstream environment. It could have, you know, in many respects, if you like use the Beatles as an analogy, is that they started off doing 3 minute pop songs basically. That's how it started. Love Me Do, Want to Hold Your Hand, She Loves You, great pop tracks, in, out, that was it. But you know, 4 years later they're doing Sergeant Pepper's, and they're in a real concept, and they're using orchestral music. They're drawing from a history of music. It's a whole new thing. You know, they've obviously had psychedelic experience, and they're managing to infuse the music that they're doing with that experience. Absolutely revelation when you think, in such a short space of time from one to the other. And that brought the ante up, because there was enough people that were prepared at that point in time to, you know, to really listen, to want to listen, you know, to want to understand. It's that whole, going back to what I was saying initially about this magazine Helix. This is it. It's almost like a religious thing. They've got this album and it's just blowing their heads off. What is coming, the colours that are coming out of this, that they want to give themselves to it because it's important. It's culturally important. It tells them about themselves, where they are like in terms of history at that point in time. And so, you know, that changed the ante. You know, that opened the door for things like Dark Side of the Moon, which was almost like, I almost see that in a kind of classical sense, as though like, you know, a Beethoven symphony would go through various movements, and it's in a similar kind of situation, you know, and so people were listening, or enough people were listening to music on that level. But there was still always those people with the short attention span that wouldn't, you know, wouldn't want to give it more than a few minutes before. Maybe now there's more of those at this point in time, because like we said before, it's so easily available. It's just around you all the time that they've lost the habit of listening, you know, of kind of giving that time to it. So they want it to do something to them really quickly. So they're passive and they want it to do it to them. Where it's not a passive thing. It's not like being passive. It's being active. It's allowing yourself to open up to it. It's being open to it. And that is an active thing. So it seems passive because you sat back, but you're there. You've opened your senses. You've said, you know, come in. And so maybe, you know, like when you mentioned with your friend like that there's something of that there, that he's either never been in the habit of you know, okay, I'll go with this, because it might be, you know, there's lots of records that, you know, like maybe it's a 5 minute record, and the whole point of that record and what the artist is doing, it all happens in that last minute. Everything else is just building towards that, it's taking you there. Now if after 3 minutes you go, oh, I can't be bothered with this anymore, it's gone, you've missed it. It's like a film, you know, not wanting to wait until that kind of end sequence where it all comes together, and you're too bored to do that. That's just the individual, you know, and that's, a lot of people do want it on a plate in a sense, and it is, in the world we are now, it is very much kind of served up to us in that way, with the idea of like talent shows, and but they're kind of put across in such a way that they're not talent, that we're watching amazing artists. You hear you know, the hyperbole of, you know, that is the most incredible performance I've ever seen, and you're thinking, have you ever seen Aretha Franklin or Ella Fitzgerald? Have you ever seen Frank Sinatra? You know, you're throwing these comments out willy nilly, where it's a very talented kid who can sing in tune, and it's a nice, but let's make a differential between artists and, you know, and talented people. It's a completely different world. And it's great TV. And, you know, on that level, it works really well. It's just that it blurs the lines, and it also the problem I have, it does affect popular culture. It means that there's so much time given to this, that there's less time given to stuff of more substance, should we say? You know, and the reason why you won't get great artists out of this is because straight away they're signing their soul over. The moment they walk in for auditions, they're saying, if I do well in this, you can manage me, you can tell me what to sing, you can tell me how to dress. They want fame. These are kids who want fame. Yeah. They don't want, you know, like, they don't want, you know, like the respect of their peers so much. They don't want people, you know, in 50 years' time to be looking back and saying, wow, what they were doing. They're not artists in that sense. They're not they haven't got that kind of approach to things. They're very much, I'll do anything for fame. They just give me the fame.
Yeah.
And that's where we are with it. You know, it's that Andy Warhol famous for 15 minutes. Get me on the telly, you know, let me be a singer. Me. Let me show myself. And, you know, it's like say, for example, you know, a lot of kids, you know, that you see on these kind of shows, you just know that they've grown up with their parents playing Whitney Houston or Aretha Franklin albums, and in this mannerist way that I mentioned before, they've learned very skillfully to copy that, and that's what they've done. They've copied it, and then they put them in front of an audience to sing it, and everyone goes, wow, what a great voice. But there's nothing original about it that's going on. They haven't taken that and made it their own and twisted it and taken it into a different place, or they haven't done, you know, what they should be doing really is they should be utilising those songs away from a talent show, maybe going and doing a few gigs and stuff, and then bit by bit bringing their own songs. So learning, like when the Beatles started out, they were just doing all cover versions of everyone else, from Little Richard to Elvis to Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins, and, you know, and even like, you know, some of the more kind of musical kind of numbers and stuff, but all that experience of playing around with all those different forms of music eventually led them towards songwriting themselves, and then they, you know, that's where the art comes out of it. And so this is stifled at source in a sense, because the moment they've gone, you know, and a kid who's done a show like that, it's going to be very difficult for them to backtrack after that and be taken seriously, you know, by people, you know, who are more interested in music on a kind of deeper level. It's a hard one for them to recover from once they've been tarred with the idea of being on, you know, the X Factor or you know, Britain's Got Talent or whatever it is. You know, as I say, as talent shows, and as TV, there's always been TV, there's been opportunity knocks, there's been new faces, there's always been talent shows and people, no problem with that. But now it's taken over to such a level in terms of what happens with the charts. It dominates the chart, and it's also, as I say, it's the fact that people buy into this myth and believe that these are incredible, you know, wow, you know, and they're not. They're just talented kids. But I think, you know, I know like a lot of people's kind of listening habits with the internet, with downloading stuff, has changed. They're not downloading as much now. I think they're just clogging up their own computers with stuff, and realise that you know, it's that musical tourism that I mentioned, that people go, oh, I love that, and they're putting all these stuff on there, and then they realise 2 years later, when they can't find stuff that they want to listen to, that they've got so much stuff on there that they've never listened to and probably never will listen to. And so it's a little bit like, you know, streamlining that. It's all about that. It's all about kind of streamlining and trying to find what it is that really, really interests you and excites you, and following those things. I mean, it's the same as somebody who, you know, who goes to, you know, like a foreign city and sits on a tourist bus and goes round and thinks that they know that city really well because they've gone and seen the sights. It's a whole different experience actually living there and and walking the streets and meeting the people than you know, a kind of sanitized way. So I think people do that you know, they might like kind of download a load of stuff and then think they know the Beatles because they've got like 2 albums or something, or you know, and maybe they've only listened to it once, and if that, but they've ticked that off, and they've, you know, who's the next one, and it's really, you know, that is a process. There is a process of just like kind of, and it is a candy shop, and it's great for being that, but I think that people have just got to like kind of work out what particularly connects with them, and maybe why it connects with them. You know, it might be a certain sound in there, and then they might be able to find that, yeah, that the reason that sound is that way is because they work with this producer, and if they just look a little bit there, they go, oh right, he did that as well, and have a listen to that, and then they might start to discover what it is that they're into. 'Cause, I mean, music's such a subjective thing. It's an individual thing that two people who you could say, yeah, they've both got great taste in music, can be totally opposed over one artist. They could say, one could say he's the best thing ever, the other could say don't rate him at all, you know, and so like it's all about you. It's all about, but a lot of people are pulled into thinking they've got to go with, you know, like what everybody else likes, and this is the general thing in life. A lot of people just go through their life, you know, pulled around in terms of what they're into musically, just to fit in, you know, with their contemporaries. Whereas anybody who's really into it on a deeper level will find their own way. And you know, it's like this thing of guilty pleasures. I hear a lot of people talk about, what's your guilty pleasures, and I'm like, I've got no guilty pleasures. It's all out there. I'm not guilty about liking the Carpenters, or you know, it's great, you know. I mean, what a voice! Like, you know, it's you know, it's a bit kind of syrupy at times and stuff, but that's the nature of what that is. You know, I don't like to separate things like that. You know, it shouldn't be, you know, like you shouldn't say what you're into. I always like it when an artist is very upfront about the music. I remember the Mondays, you know, I always thought it was great when they did that track Lazy Itis, and within the track they were referencing things like, you know, David Essex, and Ticket to Ride was in there, and Whim Away, called, you know, just all these, but they were unafraid, you know. There were the musical influences on their sleeve, you know.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. So people are pulled into music in all sorts of different ways, often, you know, peer pressures and things like that. But to find your own way and your own individuality through it, you know, it is a journey, and there's so much out there, and it's just like, as a general thing, it's not just a musical thing, it's a whole internet thing. There's so many roads you can take on the internet that it's literally about trying to find what resonates with you on a different level, not what I think I should like, but it might be, I like that. Why do I like that? What is it? Why is it connecting? Because you know, if you get to another place, it's all about vibrations. It's like everything's about vibration. We vibrate. That's why we're solid, is because we vibrate at a certain rate. And music is a vibration, and that connects with us. And that's why one thing might connect with one person, not connect quite the same with another person, because the vibrations are slightly. I mean, they knew in the '60s when they talk about the vibes and everything. It was a bit kind of hippy dippy, but there was truth in that, you know. And music plays absolutely right into that, you know. So it affects people in different ways, and you know, so it's like you find out about yourself through music in lots of ways.